All right, so we're going to talk about the respiratory system. The respiratory system and the circulatory system always often are talked about together because one puts gas in and out of the blood and the other one deals with circulating that blood around. So you can't talk about one without talking about the other. Remember, homeostasis, what we're trying to keep balanced, guys, is CO2 levels, right? Okay, and oxygen levels, okay? So that's what we want to keep. We don't want to have too much carbon dioxide, then we're going to want to bring it down. And we don't want to have not enough oxygen, and then we're going to want to bring it up, okay? And the oxygen levels and carbon dioxide levels we're talking about are in our blood. The circulatory system, right, is what transports nutrients throughout the blood vessels, okay? But it also eliminates wastes. So it's not just about delivering good things to your cells, oxygen, right? We want to put oxygen into the blood. We want to put glucose into the blood. But it's also about taking out carbon dioxide and taking out waste like urea, right, which goes through urine and things like that. Circulatory circulates that. Okay, so the respiratory system is where we have what's called a gas exchange. We want to swap out O2 in and CO2 out. And that occurs at the lungs, okay? And that's where we're talking about homeostasis. We want to keep things balanced. We don't want them to go out of whack, right? Where levels drop, we got to bring them back up. Levels go too high, we got to bring them back down. We want to maintain homeostasis. So the respiratory system, it all occurs here at these things called the alveoli sacs or alveolar sacs. This is at the dead end of your lungs. Air flows in through your trachea. So if here's the mouth, air flows in through your trachea. It breaks off into the left and right bronchial, and then it breaks off into these bronchioles, and then it ends up in these like cul-de-sacs, right? If you were to go off the freeway, take a ride on, Sepulveda, and then end up in some cul-de-sac, you're at a dead end. That's where you're at. Now, the air is inside of these things, and wrapped around them are the capillaries. So here is where the oxygen comes out of the lungs and into the blood, right? That's the oxygen that you breathe. And carbon dioxide that's in the blood goes into these sacs. So it's a very thin layer, right? Very thin layer. The pathway in which air travels, right? First of all, we have the nasal pathway, nose. But air can also come through the oral pathway, the mouth, okay? Now, if you swallow air and it goes through your esophagus, that's where you can burp, right? You don't want to swallow air. We want the air to go in through our trachea. Remember when I took the cat out, guys? Remember that right in front of the neck, that thing that looked like a hose, like a vacuum hose? That's the trachea. Not only does it take in air, but it warms the air and moistens the air so it's not so dry when it gets into our body. And there's tiny little hairs, right, inside of our nose. These tiny little hairs help trap any dust or other things that are inside of the air. So if you shaved your nose hair all the time, it's actually be bad for you. And if you picked your boogers are there for a reason because mucus is trapping stuff that's in the air that you don't want to get all the way deep down in your lungs because that would cause an infection. Your trachea is this part right here. Okay? It's about, it's about 10 inches long. It's referred to as the windpipe, okay? The epiglottis, right, is what closes this. See this right here, this little flap? It closes this. It goes down. This flap goes down and closes this when we swallow food so that we don't get food lodged into our lungs. Typically, when you get food lodged into your lungs, it goes into your right lung because this bronchial is a little bit more straight down. The one on your left lung is a little bit more of a kind of a straight 90-degree angle. It's not really 90 degrees, but it's a hard turn to the left because you have your heart right here. It's slightly on the left side of your body. So if you ever swallow anything, chances are it's stuck right here in your right trachea, your right lung, if you ever swallow anything because of the angle of those bronchial tubes. Yeah, so this is not a good picture. It doesn't really look like that. It actually, this guy is a little bit more, and this guy's a little bit more straight down. So food's not going to make a hard, left. It's going to go straight down into that part. So this is a bronchial tube, and this is a bronchial. When you have bronchitis, it's because these guys get all swollen, right? They get swollen, and they swell and shut. And that's not good, right? Remember, we have bronch, right, refers to the bronchial tubes. Itis refers to inflammation, right? And they dead end all the bronchi. This is the bronchi and the bronchioles, right? The bronchioles are the small ones. So this right here, these two tubes right here are the bronchi, right? And then they get into smaller tubes. These guys right here, those are the bronchioles. And if those guys become inflamed, you have bronchitis, okay? Asthma is if something that triggers those guys to swell up. And so inhalers, right, contain a steroid, which is an anti-inflammatory, which turns off your immune system so that it doesn't swell up. The early inhalers actually had methamphetamines in them, little cotton balls soaked with meth, and they used to just inhale that, which would cause a sympathetic nervous system reaction, which would cause your lungs to open up, right? One of the things that methamphetamines do is it opens up your lungs so that you can get more oxygen so that you can make more ATP. Well, the truckers that drove up and down I-5 and Highway 99 back in the 60s figured this out when they got paid more money for the longer trips that they made. So they would take all these inhalers, rip out those cotton balls, and suck on that to get high on meth so they can be up for 48 hours at a time and get cashed. We started realizing that we were abusing this drug, and they took that out and put in steroids instead. So don't try to disassemble your inhalers and think that there's meth in there, because there's not anymore. Okay? You guys remember when I ripped apart the cat and I showed you guys that thin membrane, that muscle that separated the abdominal pelvic cavity and the chest cavity? That's the diaphragm. When the diaphragm contracts, right, what it does is, okay, when the diaphragm contracts, it opens up the lungs. When it relaxes, it closes and squeezes the lungs because they're elastic. So what we do is there's a pressure difference inside of our lungs, and here's our trachea, right, and in our air. If our air has a greater pressure than inside of our lungs, then air will flow in. Okay, and the way that we do that is opening up our lungs, which drops the pressure, because the more volume you have, the more space the air has to move around, so the pressure drops. Now, if I want air to flow out, I make my lungs small. And so all of the air in here is like bouncing around, and there's high pressure in here and low pressure in the air, and so air will flow out. So the way that we can get air to go in and out of our lungs is by changing the size of our lung cavity, our thoracic cavity, dropping the pressure or increasing the pressure. And that's controlled by the diaphragm. We'll just keep on going, do circulatory system. Okay, so circulatory system, right, is where the heart, circle, right? The blood goes in a circle. It's not just nutrients, right, that goes to the body, but also the gases, carbon dioxide and oxygen. Whoop, 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 whoop. Right, we got it. Okay, it'll be on the screencast, guys. You can find it later. It's made up of two main organs, okay? Your heart, but also your blood vessels, okay? Your arteries go away from the heart, and we'll talk about that in a second, and your veins are draining blood to the heart. But we'll also has a component of blood as well. We have about 5 liters of blood. So take a 2-liter bottle of Pepsi, right? Another 2-liter bottle of Pepsi, and a half a 2-liter bottle of Pepsi. That's how much blood you guys have in your body. It takes about 60 seconds for a round trip. 1 minute for your blood to start at the heart, go all the way through your body, and come back, okay? So how many beats per minute tells you how many beats it takes the heart to travel one thing all the way throughout your body. That's your heart rate. An artery carries blood away from the heart. Arteries, away, okay? Veins carry the opposite, to the heart, right? That's how I remember. So arteries are going to be thicker because the pressure in the arteries is greater because it's coming directly from the pump. Veins, they're thinner, right, because it has lower pressure. Capillaries are where arteries and veins meet, and look at how thin they are. This is where gas, oxygen can leave, right, and carbon dioxide can come in because the walls are so thin, and they will diffuse. The reason why we talked about osmosis and diffusion in the beginning of the class is to understand if we have something in high concentration here and low concentration there, it'll automatically passively diffuse. But if we have something in high concentration here and low concentration there, it will diffuse, high to low, passive transport. So the way that the circulatory system performs this is by pumping it through the heart in a circle. So, and we'll talk a little bit about the direction of the heart, but we'll go really quickly. Blood that comes from your body is sucked up of oxygen. And so what happens is it goes back into the right side of your heart. So your head and arms sucked up all the oxygen. The lower part of your body sucked up all the oxygen, and you're dumping it. Notice this is all blue. It's got rid of the oxygen. It's not actually blue in your body. So now I need to go give it some more oxygen. So the right side of your heart will pump it out to the lungs. Now we're going to take in oxygen. And now notice that the blood now here is red. It's always red, but it's going to be a brighter red. Now we go back into the left side of your heart through what's called the atriums and then down into the ventricles. And then now it's time to pump that oxygen-rich blood to the body. So it goes out the aorta, takes a swing up to your neck and your head and your arms, and takes a curve down into what's called the descending aorta, down to the rest of your body and organs below. So then it goes to your stomach, to your kidneys, to your liver, suck up all that oxygen, back to the right side of the heart. So we have two loops. We have heart, lungs, back to heart. It's called the pulmonary circulation. And then we have heart, body, back to heart. That's called the systemic circulation. Okay?